Good morning. Ready to do our reading lesson today. We're going to actually read a story. We're still talking about Abraham Lincoln today, and we're going to read a story called Abraham Lincoln Was My Friend. All right, but before we do, we're going to look at some words, and we're actually going to do one of our work text pages before we do our lesson, kind of like we did yesterday. All right, so this sentence right here, the stoop of the house is a nice place to sit and watch the sunset. The stoop is the same thing as a porch. We call it a porch. Back in the day, they called it a stoop. Her adventure story was a funny yarn to tell and hear. A yarn is a story. I've never seen anything more tired looking than his drawn face. This would be a look on your face like you're just so tired, exhausted. Assuming the party was unimportant, he reckoned it did not matter whether he went. Well, if you're from the South, you know what reckoned means. It means he thought, he figured. A welcome party was arranged as a reception for their guests' arrival. A reception is like a party in honor of a person for something, for some reason, or sometimes a group of people. All right, so now that we know some words we're going to come across, let's look at work text page 37. Okay, now at the bottom you'll see a picture, and then right above that there's a purple box, and it says a dialect is a language or expression used by a certain group of people. So you may not think it, but we live in the South and even in Texas, and those people who live in Texas tend to have a certain dialect. We pronounce our I's different, and we generally draw out our words. Have you ever heard of the Texas drawl? That means people tend to talk a little slower here in Texas, and we have our own way of speaking. It's still the English language. It's just different ways of hearing it and saying it. Now think about somebody who's from Australia or maybe somebody from England. Have you ever heard somebody talk from a place like that? Now they speak English too, right? They speak the same language, but they speak it in a different way. And they even have different words that mean different things. In fact, in England, when they say a cookie, they actually mean what we call a cracker. So, everybody every area in the world that has the same language, they speak it in a different way. And a lot of times they have certain expressions or phrases that mean different things. So what we're going to do on this page, it says to read the sentence and to fill in the circle beside the phrase that best explains the meaning of the phrase in bold print. So Billy Brown footed it up to the soldier's home where Mr. Lincoln was living. What do you think footed it up means? He footed it up to the soldier's home. It means he walked. So fill in walked. Number 2, there was lots of people sitting around in a little room waiting for Mr. Lincoln. What do you mean? What do you think it means? Was lots of people sitting around. Now that's kind of the dialect that we use, isn't it? So it just means there were many people sitting. So you'll fill in number 1. We say setting a lot of times. Look at number 3. Mr. Lincoln shook Billy's hand fit to kill. Very tightly is what it meant, fit to kill. Doesn't mean he's going to kill him. It just means he shook it very tightly. Look at number 4. It just did Billy's heart good to hear Mr. Lincoln laugh. You ever heard somebody say that phrase? Just did Billy's heart good, or it did my heart good. It means it made you feel good. So it's going to be the first one. Made Billy feel good. So if something ever makes you feel good, you say, that just makes my heart good. Just did my heart good. Number 5. Billy didn't have any complaints in his pocket. That just means he didn't have anything to complain about. It's going to be the last one there. What about number 6? Billy had no advice up his sleeve. You ever heard somebody say that? You got something up your sleeve? Okay, it's the first one. He didn't have any advice to give. It means he didn't have any. Or if you do have something up your sleeve, like I got a prank up my sleeve, that means you got a secret up your sleeve, it means it's a secret to you. It doesn't really mean it's up your sleeve. Number 7, Billy spun yarns for Mr. Lincoln. You know what it means to spin yarns? That was this word right here. It's a story. So he told stories to Mr. Lincoln. So it's the second one. And number 8, when he heard of Mr. Lincoln's death, Billy flared up. Means he became angry. He became angry. All right, let's look at our story that we're going to read. Now, I'm going to read this to you, but you've got to follow along with me, okay? Remember our deal. Let me see, I've got to make a note here. All right. So let's look at page 92. The title is Abraham Lincoln Was My Friend. Now I'm going to read this part right up at the top. This, it's in italics up there. Billy Brown and Abraham Lincoln were neighbors in Springfield, Illinois. When Mr. Lincoln became the President of the United States and went to Washington, Billy stayed behind. Each day, he eagerly read the newspaper for news of his good friend Abe. He read about the war and learned that some people blamed Mr. Lincoln because it lasted so long. He read that each day the president saw dozens of people and that he helped them whenever he could. Billy often wished he could do something for his old friend. In 1864, Billy Brown made a trip to Washington to see the president. Billy tells of his visit with the president when Mr. Lincoln was staying at a home very near a battlefield. So let's go ahead and start reading on page 92. Now, we're going to find out why Billy Brown decided to travel, and he traveled a long way to see his friend. So we're gonna find out why he traveled. So let's look at page 92. I'm going to start reading, but remember, you've got to follow along with me. I footed it up to the soldiers' home where Mr. Lincoln was living then, right among the sick soldiers in their tents. There was lots of people sitting around in a little room waiting for him. A door opened, and out came little John Nicolay. I went up to him and said, "How'd you do, John? Where's Mr. Lincoln?" Have you an appointment with Mr. Lincoln?" he says. "No, sir, I ain't, and it ain't necessary. You just trot along, Johnny, and tell him Billy Brown's here and see what he says." In about 2 minutes, the door popped open and out came Abe Lincoln, his face all lit up. He saw me first thing and shook my hand fit to kill. "Billy," he says, "come right in. You're going to stay to supper with Mary and me." He had a right smart lot of people to see, but as soon as he was through, he went out on the back stoop and talked and talked and talked. I told him about everybody in Springfield, the weddings, the births, the funerals, and the buildings. I guess there wasn't a yarn I'd heard in the last 3.5 years that I didn't spin for him. Laugh? You'd ought to heard him laugh. It just did my heart good, for I could see what they'd been doing to him. He always was a thin man, but he was thinner than ever now, and his face was drawn and gray. It was enough to make you cry. Well, we had supper, and then we talked some more. About 10 o'clock, I started to leave. "Billy," he says, "what'd you come for?" "I came to see you, Abe." "But you haven't asked me for anything, Billy. What do you want me to do for you?" "Nothing, Abe. I just wanted to see you. I felt kind of lonesome because it had been so long since I'd seen you, and I was afraid I'd forget some of those yarns if I didn't see you soon." "Well, sir, you should have seen his face when he looked at me. Billy Brown," he says slow-like, "do you mean to tell me that you came all the way from Springfield, Illinois just to visit with me? You don't have any complaints in your pocket or advice up your sleeve?" "Yes, sir," I says. "That's about it. Why, I'd go to Europe to see you if I couldn't do it no other way, Abe." "Well, sir, I was never so astonished in all my life. He just grabbed my hand and shook it nearly off, and the tears just poured down his face. 'Billy,' he says, 'you'll never know just what you've done to me. I'm homesick, Billy, just plumb homesick, and it seems as if this war will never be over. Many a night I can see the boys dying on the fields, and I can hear their mothers crying for 'em at home. And I can't help it, Billy. I have to send them down there. We've got to save the Union, Billy. We've got to." Billy Brown returned to Springfield. After a while, the war ended and the nation rejoiced. Billy never saw his friend Abe Lincoln again. Billy tells how he got the news of Mr. Lincoln's death. I tell you, it was a great day out here when we heard Lee surrendered. Somehow the only thing I could think of was how glad Mr. Lincoln would be. Me and Ma reckoned he'd come right out and make us visit and get rested, so we began right off making plans about the reception we'd give him. A brass band, parade, speeches, fireworks, everything. Seems as if I couldn't think of anything else. I was coming out to open the store one morning, and all the way down I was thinking how I'd decorate the windows, how I'd tie a flag onto that old chair. Then I saw Hiram Jones coming toward me. He looked so old and all bent over that I didn't know what had happened. "Hiram," I said, "what's the matter? Be you sick?" "Billy," he says, and he could hardly say it. "Billy, they've killed Mr. Lincoln." Well, I just turned cold all over, and then I flared up. "Hiram Jones, you're lying. You're crazy. How dare you tell me that? It ain't so." "Don't, Billy," he says. "Don't go on. I ain't lying. It's so. He'll never come back, Billy. He's dead." And he fell to sobbing out loud right there in the street. Somehow all I could think about was all those yarns I'd saved up. Now I'd never get to tell 'em to him. I'd never get to see him resting out in the old rocking chair, see that smile on his face. But Ma stopped me from that selfish foolishness. "Don't look like that, Billy," she says. "He saved the Union. That was his job. He saved the Union, Billy." And I knew it was true. He had done what he had been sent to do. All right. Great story. Kind of sad, but great story nonetheless. So, how do you know that Abe Lincoln was glad to see Billy? Shook his hand, his face lit up. He came out. He didn't send his guy out to get him. He came out there to get him when he first came up there. What does Billy do for Abe Lincoln on the back stoop? When they go back on the back stoop, he spins yarns, tells him all kinds of stuff, gets him caught up on where he came from. Why is Billy especially glad to see Abe Lincoln laughing at his yarns? He can see that Abe Lincoln is really fretting over the war, and he was glad to see him laughing, glad to see him having a good time. Why is Abe Lincoln surprised that Billy has come only to visit and not ask for anything or complain or give advice? Billy came so far. If I had a map, I'd show you, but I'm not going to pull one up today. He came a long, long distance, about half maybe a little less than half across the United States to see him. And so the president is kind of shocked that he didn't come all that way to tell him something or to ask him a favor or something like that. And Abraham Lincoln, "Are you sure? Are you sure you don't have something up your sleeve? You sure you don't have something in your pocket?" So why did the president begin to cry? He misses home, and he realizes that Billy is a true friend. He went all that way just to visit, just to see him. And that made him feel happy that Billy wasn't just coming to see him because he was president and wanted to have something or whatever. Now, how do you know that the president enjoys talking with Billy? He laughs. Look at page 93. It says, let's see right here. On the right-hand side, it says, "I guess there wasn't a yarn I'd heard in the last 3.5 years that I didn't spin for him." Let's read this sentence where it says laugh. "Laugh? You'd ought to have heard him laugh. It just did my heart good, for I could see what they'd been doing to him." So he did laugh, and his friend was very glad to see him laugh because he had had it hard during the war. What reasons, I'm on page 94 now, what reasons does Billy give for coming to see him? He missed him, and he had some yarns he wanted to tell him, some stories he wanted to tell him, right? All right, look at page 95. How did Billy and his wife react to the news of Mr. Lincoln's death? Billy was very sad and mad. He even said that he was very mad. He flared up. He got mad. The whole town was getting ready for him to come back because the war was over. So they were getting ready for him to come back, and they were going to have a parade and a party, a big reception for him. And then they found out he was killed, and so he wasn't coming back. But then Billy's wife said, now look, don't fret. He did what God sent him to do. She didn't say that, but that's what she meant. Look at the very last line on page 95. And I knew it was true. He had done what he had been sent to do. That's referring to God sending Abraham Lincoln to do what he did, to save the Union, and that's what happened. All right, take your work text out, page 38. Now this is a page that I'm going to grade. On numbers 1 through 5, it says complete the sentences. First one says Billy Brown went to the soldier's home too, and then just finish that sentence, okay? You can look back in your story, and then at the bottom, you're going to put some words in the blanks that make sense, okay? I'm not going to help you with this page. I want to make sure that you did listen to the story as I read it to you, okay? All right. If you need to go back and read some of it, go right ahead. All right? That's all for today.